of Kenyans actually live in their own houses. I don't know whether we are actually even aware of that. So it is not as much a problem as we are making it look. I would agree with government in terms of trying to improve the standards of living of the people. That is a good thing. But the formula of implementation, that is now where I have a problem with. But then still sticking on the finance bill and looking a bit in the positive of that finance bill, I think I agree with the tax amnesty in the finance bill, whereby, because this is going to help a lot of young people who started their companies while in campus and they did not know a lot of things about how companies are even run. And so by the time these people really want to even start doing anything with that company, it has never done anything, but it's already in debt. So you have people with millions of companies out here, thousands of companies out here, but this company is already in debt. The owners of the companies cannot even service the debt. So the issue of tax amnesty provides an opportunity now. And this actually affects majorly the young people who are ambitious enough to start some of these things while in school. Now they can be able to have those companies running and that. And also the issue of the tax refund, I think, is good for businesses, because the aspect of you can be able to overpay your tax obligations, but then you cannot be refunded in sufficient time. And when the other time comes, you have to keep paying. The fact that now you can actually have a tax refund is good and good enough for business people. So I think that is a bit of a positive side of this finance bill. Mm-hmm. But again, be that as it may, both the positive and the negative in this finance bill, the biggest test is with our parliament. Because I love it that the finance bill has both issues, so we are able to test the capacity of our parliament. Because the parliament is an independent arm of government. Now we need time now to see, this is an opportunity for us to know, the people we elected in parliament, mm-hmm. are they going to think on their own, or they are just going to be whipped as usual? Because we must be able to see our parliamentarians, you must be able to see your MP come out to defend your interests in this finance bill. Mm-hmm. So that is a good test for the legislative arm of government. It is a good test for the MPs. Mm-hmm. So it's good for us to now see what will they really do about this.
Right, I want us to still stick here on the 3% house levy before we come back to all this in Parliament. Now, when the President says the employed will either receive a house or savings with interest, can Kenyans really bank on this promise? Because the President says he intends to build 200,000 houses a year to create jobs for at least 1 to 2 million youths. Can Kenyans bank on that promise? Advice?
I don't know how. This is a promise that the president has made, and we have seen him make several other promises. And he says, when I listen to him, he says actually the main motivation for this is the creation of jobs for the young people. Creation of jobs for the young people is a good thing. It is something I agree with, that we must be able to create jobs for these young people. But then we are not supposed to move government operation into being a motive. We can't run government on emotions. So the fact that we need to create jobs does not necessarily mean we need to disenfranchise another person. We do not need to necessarily force other workers to get into something just because we need to solve this, the menace of job creation. So in terms of that, I wouldn't want to be so pessimistic and say I wouldn't want to hold the president to account to that. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to say that I don't think it is something that he will achieve. I would want to leave it to time, mm-hmm. and see whether it is something that he will be able to achieve.
Prof, your thoughts?
Again, I mean, I think if you start interrogating these intentions, mm-hmm. what you see again is superficiality, mm-hmm. of these ideas. Because the question we are asking is that is there construction of homes in this country? The answer is yes. Who is doing that? Is the private sector, and they've actually been doing that. Mm-hmm. Do they employ people? Yes, they do. So why does government want to come to do what the private sector is doing to achieve a small percentage of what the private sector is already achieving? These people who are being employed in construction by the private sector are not Ugandans, they're not Tanzanians, they're actually Kenyans. Mm-hmm. And in the private sector, this is a core business that they do. It's unfair, honestly. We don't elect government to go and compete with the private sector. We don't elect government to build for us houses. Mm-hmm. We elect government to govern. Construction of houses is best done by the private sector. The private sector is already doing it without any incentive from government. Mm-hmm. And the private sector is actually employing people. So why can't government enable the private sector to do what they're already doing better? and it will actually result in employment of people. The question, for example, that we ask ourselves is that who are these young people that the president wants to employ in the construction sector? The construction sector is actually one of those areas. I work in that sector. It's actually one of those areas where almost 80% of the work that is done there requires a particular level of skills. Who told the president, who told the cabinet that Kenyans have decided to go and work in the construction sector? The youths, the so-called youths. That's where they've chosen. So that is where we're going to create jobs and particularly work on government projects. Let me give a very basic example. We had Kazi kwa Vijana in Jubilee's time. And what did you need as a skill base to work in Kazi kwa Vijana? You just needed yourself. Because it was about sweeping, it was about cleaning, it was about clearing of things and so on. And you're paid weekly. And this dealt both with unemployed youth and unskilled youth. And these to me are the most vulnerable of the youths. The youths who are already trained in construction are already in that construction industry, actually. They do not need this particular project as it actually were. The president says that this is actually also a way of savings. Why is government forcing me to save through a housing scheme? Secondly, what is their return on investment? We're democratic and we're also free market. I should be allowed as a Kenyan and as a civil servant to decide whether I want to save through the money markets, or whether I want to buy stocks, or whether I want to invest in my own small business. You can't force me to invest in housing where government really has zero evidence that has ever worked. And we need to remind this government that before it was the obligation of government to actually house civil servants. And we shifted away from that and decided to give civil servants house allowance. And that was also tied with home ownership, so that they would go to the market and choose wherever they wanted to stay, based on their own reasons and so on. This was a government policy. So are we shifting government policy? And the issue is that if we're shifting government policy, there should be a good rationale. The president says it's the law. It's not the law. We know the housing fund has been crafted as a bill that is that the government intends to take in parliament, but it has not been passed. But anyway, even if it was passed, it's still a bad law. There is no law that can force me and force government employees to actually have your money deducted into forced saving for a product whose the chances of you getting that particular product is near nil. On the 200,000 houses, and I keep insisting, and I've done studies for government in this regard. I hope these guys are listening to me. Uhuru Kenyatta did police housing. I am the one who actually did feasibility for that, and put this on the table. That look here, we didn't have capacity to deliver 20,000 houses per year. What happened? Koto was given the contract. Did they deliver? They didn't. The industry does not have capacity to deliver 200,000 houses per year. We don't have. We don't even have adequate cement and all those things to actually deliver in that. We're shocking the industry. In fact, for us, the realistic thing the government can actually do is to scale up. Is to actually scale up as the industry, expands and builds up the, the capacity and so on. So and from whichever angle you look at this, is nonsensical. Is nonsensical from a technical perspective. Is nonsensical from delivery of houses. Is nonsensical from just choice in a democratic society. It is nonsensical in terms of forcing people to save. Is nonsensical. Government knows that they will not deliver this actually in the first instance. It is nonsensical even from a legal perspective. It is nonsensical from design of levies and taxes and so on. Like I said, the only the only characteristic that this has of a decent levy or tax is that it's easy to collect. That is actually one of the issues you look at when you're designing these sort of instruments. That is the only bit that it actually meets. If I was to mark it, yes, I'm a professor, I give marks normally on these sort of things. If I was to mark this out of 100, I would actually give it 0.5. 5%. That's how bad it is. I don't
Right.
think it even makes 20%.
Right, now advice, I want to come back to you. Azimio la Umoja coalition leader, that is Raila Odinga, says that should this finance bill 2023 be passed in parliament, he will be going back, he'll rally his people back to the streets. What do you think of that? I understand that in the first sections, the first times when we had these mandamanos, you distance yourselves from the mandamano, and these as the youth leader in the Jubilee coalition. What do you make of this statement by Raila Odinga
I think
today?
first of all, that's not a very right allegation. When the Mandamano started, I was actually part of it. And I remember we did Nairobi, we did several parts, including when we were doing the consultative forums. So it's not right that I distanced myself. I don't know where you have gotten those that allegation from.
I'm glad that you're here
But
to
then,
defend yourself.
but then now on the issue of rallying our people back to the streets, first of all, we must come from the understanding that picketing is not illegal. It is allowed, and people are allowed to express their opinion in that regard. And the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, is right to that extent. But then when you look at now the effect, because when we have a finance bill, the most of the work that we should be doing is to ensure that it doesn't pass. That is the most of the work. I wish we were in a position where the former Prime Minister would be working harder in rallying the parliamentarians not to pass the bill than preparing to go to the street after it is passed. Because what happens there, then you score political bonga points but do not necessarily affect the running of the country. Because at the end of the day, the finance bill will have been passed. At the end of the day, the people, the 3% will be taken from you here, who is working here. At the end of the day, every other thing will be going through. I wish we were able to say, let us segregate. Plus, we cannot be able to cast the bill in totality. I wish we were able to actually segregate and say, we don't want matter 1, 2, and 3. These matters we are actually pushing parliamentarians to ensure this does not actually pass. I think that will have better result than going to the street. Going to the street will score political bonga points, and the common mwananchi will feel like we are actually fighting for them as Azimio. But I don't think it will have the right effect, because the right effect should be that the bill, where there is a problem, it should not pass. But once it passes, when you go to the street and whatsoever, there's nothing that changes. So I wish that my opinion would be that my leader Raila Odinga would be able to really rethink that, so that we can be able to canvass this in another way. We can be able to canvass this in a manner that ensures the dangerous aspects of the bill, like maybe the housing levy and others, do not see the light of day. I think that would be more progressive for the country. Yeah.
Prof, do you think that with Raila Odinga saying that he intends to rally his people back to the streets, should the finance bill be passed in Parliament, will it be a solution?
Yeah, on this one, actually, we are on the same page with advice. And the issue for me, even in the previous mandamanos, the issue for me has been has actually been quite simple. That we are not applying ourselves, rigorously to the issues of the day. In this sense, that if government on the other hand said, okay, fine, what do people actually want that that we should do or do differently? And I think as the opposition strategizes and works on the street, I agree totally with the advice on this. It is important that that the opposition is clear about the end game, about what we want, and actually how we actually want it. And to me, that even makes the work of our parliamentarians easy. Yeah, because we're saying, look, of course, like all finance bills anyway, there would be just normal things, the status quo that continues, then new taxes and levies that have been proposed and so on. We need to take a position on those things. If you're saying, for example, that government on one hand is saying, look here, we are going to remove subsidies, and if we're removing subsidies because these subsidies distort the functioning of the markets. You see, that is something that makes sense from an economic point of view. On the other hand, you ask government that, okay, fine, if you remove some subsidies, the cost of goods are actually going to go up. And government then says that, okay, fine, I mean, if you look at the fuel, for example, says, there are so many taxes, just like they've been saying before, there are so many taxes, we're going to remove some and we're going to consolidate them. So to me, the sort of conversation that should be happening is, for example, as Emil was saying, look here, guys, when it comes to petrol, you are removing subsidies, we agree with you on that, but you're adding no new taxes, and in fact, you're removing this and that tax, so that the prices can remain the same or actually, come down. And even on other issues, because I don't really agree that you need to remove subsidies in everything. When it comes to the food basket, of course, we know it's affected quite a bit, for example, with fuel. But on the other hand, we have to subsidize food. Food must be affordable to our people. We must subsidize it. Even the West does that. And we want concrete things where we're saying, yes, we want, us as EMEO, we actually want subsidies on maize and maize products, because we actually want the price of maize to actually reach this particular level. On this particular product, we don't mind removing the subsidy, but on this particular product, we actually want the taxes and levies consolidated. Because the generic thing that I think Azimio is putting on the table, and I agree with that, is that given the current economic situation of Kenyans, we do not want to actually burden Kenyans further, be they through taxes or through indirect impacts of taxes and levies. We want that in the worst case scenario, the status quo should actually remain. But what you actually want to see is more rigorous analysis and taking actual positions and saying, look here, I mean, for us, this is the deal breaker. If you don't do this, we shall not actually support the bill. And again, going back to what advice was actually saying, for me, I would want to look at this more as a public debate on the finance bill, rather than a post-approval demonstrations. And yes, you'll end up scoring bonga points, but remember, once the finance bill is passed, it's law, and it'll be implemented. You can demonstrate however much you actually want. And I think the key message to our leaders is that, look here, yes, you can rally us and you can demonstrate, but on the other hand, there are also some things that you already have the powers to do. That's why we have parliamentarians. In fact, the opposition has significant numbers in parliament. And of course, there are also other people that if some of these things are canvassed properly on a case-by-case basis, we may be able to actually get what you want, as opposed to lazing around, and getting these totally unpopular and unfair sort of provisions making their way into the bill, and then coming back later to hold the government at ransom when there's absolutely nothing that you can actually do. Sorry to say this. The earlier bits of demonstrations, and I highlight that that's one of the reasons why I never joined the demonstration in the first instance. You lazy around, you lose an election, the Supreme Court pronounces itself to this, IBC is actually literally disbanded because there's no commissioner, and then you tell us to open servers. You score political bonga points, but that is totally useless. It is, those demands are demands that can never really be realized. And I think as we're approaching this, because the issues that the Right Honorable is actually putting on the table are issues that are actually affecting Kenyans. The cost of living is something that you can't dispute. It's affecting Kenyans. Even the president agreed the other day on an interview that this is actually affecting Kenyans. We need to move to the next level to say that as opposition, these are the actual changes. These are the actual issues we want addressed. And these are something, a no-no for us. And some of those things can be done. And we're paying people millions of shillings to just think about those things. You wonder what parliamentarians do, honestly. If they're not even discussing this.
Prof,
they're discussing a demonstration.
I'm being reminded about time, but I would love to get your opinion or advice before we wind up. We are winding up, by the way. You're the National Youth Chair in the Jubilee Party.
Yeah.
What is happening in the Jubilee Party with all these leadership wrangles between Jeremiah Kioni, Kanini Kega? They all want this, both claim this Secretary General seat. You are a leader there. What is happening?
I think, first of all, what is happening in the Jubilee Party is nothing strange. It is what happens in in all serious political organizations, because at the end of the day, we are at the center, at the center of politics, and the major thing that is happening in Jubilee right now is that there is a quest to have the party leadership reorganized for the sake of pushing the party forward between now and the next election. And so that is what is causing a bit of jittery here and there, because a section of the party says that we should retain the status quo. Another section of the party, we are saying, this status quo did not help the party. This status quo led to us coming from over 100 members of parliament to 32 members of parliament today. And therefore, we must be able to navigate a way in which let us move the party forward. Let us be able to have the party in its independence struggle to move an agenda forward, not just disappearing into what would be an Azimio mantra or disappearing into such kind of a narrative. Despite the fact that we are in Azimio, we must have an independent thought as a party. There are things that we must be able to speak to as political parties, because at the end of the day, political parties must exist in their singular entities. But what is happening now is that there is a lot of whipping. And what I would want to tell you in short of all this is that this is purely a political banter. There is nothing extraordinary about what is happening in Jubilee. But as it stands now, the Internal Dispute Resolution Committee has sat last week, and this matter is actually under discussion at that level. And so I think, and then there is also the ruling by that court is supposed to be made within, I think, tomorrow or the following day. Right. So at the end of the day, we are going to have very clear-cut Jubilee Party. But at the end of the day, also, what in politics, the moment you are not talked about, the moment you're not making news, then you are an irrelevant political party. I think as it stands now, we are the most relevant political party in the Republic of Kenya today.
Prof, in 1 minute, I want you to tell us what you make of Jubilee Party rambles at the moment, in 1 minute.
Well, I mean, I think she's the last kicks of a dying horse. But still, I think to be fair to advise and the other guys, is that it's still a horse. It's not a dying cow or but definitely, I think it's interesting because and it'll be good to actually see Jubilee, survive out of power, because one of my biggest concerns in this country has been that parties come in, they get into power, and they're not properly institutionalized. So when the leadership shifts out of power, they just die. We had parties like PNU. Yeah. We have KANU that is now almost irrelevant. We had parties like NAC and so on. And what we are praying for in this country is institutionalization of political parties, so that if I belong to a party, then I really don't have to jump ship when you lose elections because of imminent death, but actually stay on and build, knowing that the institution is there for some time. So on this note, I really wish advice on this political party very well.
Right, thank you so much, gentlemen, for
Thanks,
being for us. I think we should wind up at this point before they switch off the lights on us.
Again.
Cheers us out of this studio. So thank you once again for coming.
Thank you.
Alright, that brings us to the end of our bulletin tonight. Many thanks indeed for watching KUTV Primetime News this Tuesday. We meet again next week, inshallah. My name is Anne Udida. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Evans Odhiambo. Have a good night.